The story kicks off in a glitzy, high-end ballroom, the kind of place that's supposed to be romantic for couples to share a look, but it's also a total gossip hub. Some ladies are whispering about a gorgeous girl who suddenly showed up, remembering her messy past with her parents' debts. The chatter carries on with another group of women jealous of Baroness Ailan's pricey dress and necklace, wondering how she could afford them after she was just begging for loans. It turns out this lady, who vanished from high society after her family fell apart, is back with some shocking news for everyone. The gossips are reminded she's not Baroness Ailan anymore. She's Judith Mius, the daughter-in-law of the powerful Mius family. The ladies find the news of her pregnancy super weird, especially since the young duke has been missing for 5 years, even though rumors say he confirmed the kid is his. One lady doubts the pregnancy is even real, thinking it's all some calculated trick, and she sounds pretty sure of herself. Suddenly, a powerful voice cuts them off, asking why they're talking so much about her daughter-in-law. The Duchess of Mius confronts the trash-talking women, accusing them of disrespecting her family by questioning the girl carrying their direct bloodline. The guilty lady starts stuttering, trying to apologize to the intimidating Duchess. The Duchess finds Judith and tells her to just ignore these petty people and get ready to leave. She adds gently that the baby in her womb probably needs some rest too. Judith agrees, and they both head out of the ballroom together. One of the ladies lets out a huge sigh of relief, glad she survived that awkward run-in with the Duchess. Her friend reminds her she got lucky because ticking off Isabella Mius, who's famous for her sharp temper, could have ended badly. Despite the drama, the women conclude the pregnancy must be real, but they're still wondering where the young duke, Ekian Mius, actually is. In the carriage, the Duchess tells Judith that the rumors about her being pregnant with Ekian's kid have finally stuck, which means they can avoid declaring him officially dead. Judith tells her she'll return the expensive dress and jewelry as soon as they get back, noting she kept them in perfect condition. The Duchess hears this and sharply asks if she's lost her mind. She insists that Judith, as their daughter-in-law, even if it's just a contract, deserves these gifts, and tells her the dress looks great on her. The Duchess then orders her to whip up a late-night snack once they're back at the mansion, mentioning she looks way too thin, even for a fake pregnancy. Judith agrees, and the Duchess looks satisfied with that. Judith realizes the Duchess's harsh words are actually her way of caring. She basically means, accept the gifts and eat well. She starts thinking her new life as a contract daughter-in-law for a villain family is actually better than she expected. She remembers her painful past, being chased by debt collectors for money she didn't even borrow, and feels grateful to be with the kind Mius family. She decides to enjoy this temporary setup for a few months, thinking Ekian Mius won't be coming back anytime soon. When they arrive at the mansion, a blonde guy suddenly appears, commenting on how late they are. The Duchess is completely stunned when she realizes the guy is her missing son, Ekian. Ekian looks over at Judith, referring to her as his wife. Then he adds that she's the one carrying his child. Judith is standing there in total shock. She really thought he was dead. The story flashes back to when Judith, formerly known as Ailan, got her past life memories back after her dad committed suicide, leaving her with just a title and mountain of debt. After her mom ran off with a servant and took everything valuable, and while she was being kicked out of her house, she realized she'd been reincarnated into a novel she'd read. At first, she thought she'd gone crazy from the trauma of her tragic life, but the novel's memories were so vivid she couldn't ignore them, so she ran off to check if this world was for real. She remembers the title, A Flower Blooms in the Ruins, which is about a heroine who loses her flower shop but finds love in the end. She decided if she found the heroine, she wasn't crazy. Otherwise, she'd have to face the fact that she'd lost it. After a long run, she reached a flower shop and immediately recognized the heroine. She felt a huge wave of relief knowing she wasn't insane, but she was surprised to find out the heroine was only 12 years old at this point in the story. She recalls the cruel things debt collectors and former family friends said when they abandoned her. She remembers the pressure she faced to marry some old guy just to pay off the debts. She wakes up from a nightmare filled with these painful memories. Looking at her reality, she finds it even harder than she imagined, worse than the nightmare itself. She wishes all of this was just a dream, but she decides not to give up. Instead, she comes up with a plan to use her knowledge of the novel. Realizing she can use what she knows to her advantage, she decides to review everything she remembers from the start. She maps out the timeline. The heroine is 12 now. The prologue starts when she's 15 with a street fire, and the main story kicks off in her adulthood. She notices that even though she remembers the novel perfectly, there's nothing about the main characters she can use right now. She figures she has to use info about the villains or side characters, and then an idea clicks. She remembers the Mius family, the villain's family in the book. She recalls the villain, Karl Mius, who torments the heroine but has a tragic backstory. Karl's older brother and family heir, Eki and Mius, vanished when Carl was little, and he's set to be declared dead after 5 years of being missing. To stop that, the Mius family hires a maid as a proxy daughter-in-law and spreads a fake rumor that she's pregnant with Ekian's baby, but Ekian never returned, which led to Carl's mental breakdown. The reason for Carl's spiral was the hidden abuse he suffered at the hands of that contract daughter-in-law. Judith decides she's the one who will take the job as the proxy daughter-in-law. She sees it as the perfect plan to stop the child abuse and make the money she desperately needs. To pull it off, she first has to survive for 3 years and sell her knowledge of the future to the Grey Information Guild. She arrives at the Grey Information Guild headquarters and gets welcomed in. She tells the receptionist she's there to sell information. She asks to speak directly with the guildmaster, but she's told that's against the rules. She pretends to be disappointed, wondering if she's being rejected just because she's young. She cleverly points out that it's unfair since she heard the guildmaster is also a minor. Her plan works, and someone new enters the room asking who was looking for him. A masked man appears, commenting on having an interesting guest. The masked man, who turns out to be the guildmaster, leads her inside, curious about the info she brought. Judith remembers the Grey Information Guild is a fast-growing organization that was destined to burn down at the start of the novel. Despite its fate, the guild was known for high-quality info, and she spent 3 years selling them tips. 3 years later, the guildmaster congratulates her on becoming an adult and gives her a bouquet of flowers. She thinks about how she's become a VIP client, even getting gifts from the boss himself. She asks how he knew her birthday since she never told him. He claims knowing stuff like that is just part of his job as a guild head, then asks how she knew his age. He says he's super curious how she knows so much. She dodges the question, claiming she learned these things while traveling to pay off her debts. He praises her, saying the high accuracy of her info is always impressive. Judith thinks to herself that her info is spot on because it's from the novel, and her main goal was to get close to the guildmaster. She explains she insisted on dealing with him directly because the quality of info changes depending on who's buying. She announces she has something to sell today and something to buy. The master notes it's her first time buying info, so she suggests using the price of her expensive info as payment. The master agrees, hyped for the valuable info she's selling, and asks what she wants to buy. She tells him she needs info on Eki and Mius. She thinks about Eki and Mius, the genius heir who vanished suddenly and whose fate was never revealed in the novel. All she knows is that it's been nearly 5 years since he went missing, and his family is looking for a fake daughter-in-law, the role she plans to take. The master confirms she's asking about the young duke missing for nearly 5 years, so she emphasizes the importance of that specific timing. He asks why she's suddenly interested in the young duke. She nervously replies she's just a little interested. He clarifies his question, asking what kind of interest it is. She boldly declares her interest is romantic. The guildmaster is confused by her answer, so she playfully asks if he thought she only cared about money. Judith justifies her interest by saying the young duke is famous for being handsome and perfect, so why be surprised? The guildmaster points out the duke never met a girl named Judith, so she explains she watched him from afar because of her social status. She praises his knowledge of those details, then asks where he gets all his info about the duke. She keeps asking questions about why he ran away, where he is now, and what he's doing. She hopefully asks if he knows the last place he was seen. The guildmaster apologizes, admitting he knows almost nothing about him. She's surprised he knew they never met, so he explains his info was from before the disappearance and there's zero info on him now in any guild. He adds that even the duke's family has no news, guessing that was the young duke's own wish when he left. He mentions the duchy is keeping his position open because it's hard to let go, but this wait will eventually end with a death declaration. He wraps up saying there's no info he can provide and apologizes again. She feels disappointed, realizing he's not hiding info on purpose and that being a VIP didn't give her any real leads. She wonders where Ekian could be, figuring if he were alive, he couldn't have vanished so perfectly without a trace. She remembers he didn't even show up by the end of the novel, so she starts doubting if he's actually dead. She decides to stop thinking about the depressing stuff, convincing herself he's a capable guy and probably fine somewhere. She hopes no crazy variables happen after she's announced as the fake bride, like him suddenly showing up. The guildmaster changes the subject, asking how her romantic feelings for the young duke developed. He's puzzled by how deep her feelings are despite no connection, so she simply says he's handsome. He asks if that's the only reason, and she confirms she's a very visual person, and he looked great even from a distance. She claims she just wanted to look into it after becoming an adult, but can't do anything now, so he expresses his regret for not being able to help. He then remembers she was also planning to sell some info. She asks for his pen, explaining her info is so expensive that a simple trade wouldn't be fair. The guildmaster is surprised to see her drawing a map of the neighborhood they're in. She points to a specific spot on the map, an illegal trade shop, and asks if he knows it. She reveals a huge shipment of explosives just arrived there, warning that the whole street will blow up soon if it's not handled fast. She tells him he can pay for this info later. She adds with a smile that she'll even deduct the cost of the flowers he gave her. She leaves confident that the master will handle the situation efficiently, even if it involves an illegal shop. She feels hesitant. She preferred not to mess with the original novel's plot until her own plan was ready. She thinks about how she avoided making tons of money despite knowing the future, fearing the butterfly effect. So, she stuck to selling marginal info that didn't change the story, scared her plans might fail. But she realizes this fire is a major event that starts the novel, and changing it will definitely affect the timeline. Still, she couldn't just stand by knowing people would die, and reassures herself it won't mess up the fake bride plan. She justifies it to herself by saying her plan will change the story anyway, but it'll save the heroine and stop Carl's abuse. She concludes her plan is best for everyone. She'll stay for a few months, fake a miscarriage, take the money, and leave. She decides to head to the Mias Duchy the next day. The butler stops her from meeting the Duchess without an appointment, but she insists it's urgent and about the young Duke. The servant explains her options are limited to sending a letter or requesting a meeting that might be rejected, so she asks how long that takes. He tells her she should expect to wait at least 3 months. She's shocked and panicked at the thought of waiting that long. She understands the delay, realizing many people tried to scam the family with fake info about Ekian. She worries they might find another fake daughter-in-law in that time. While the butler asks if the wait is okay, she realizes she has no choice but to reveal a secret about the young Duke to prove she's serious. She tells the butler a specific detail about Ekian's childhood hate for pomegranates and how that changed after he was 10. The butler is stunned, while she thinks about the need to prove she's the real deal. The scene shifts to the Duchess, who is briefed by the butler on what Judith said about Ekian's childhood habits. The Duchess tells Judith she granted this meeting out of desperation, assuming she knows about the hundreds of fakes before her. She warns her that she must be aware of the severe consequences those liars faced. Judith calmly replies she knows, but she didn't come to give info on his location. She surprises the Duchess by saying she's there to offer a deal. She admits it's hard to earn trust, but points out how easy it is to verify the pomegranate story. The Duchess hints she needs stronger proof. She points her to a hidden letter behind a brick in the young Duke's bedroom that he wrote as a kid. She suggests discussing the main topic after verifying the letter exists. The Duchess immediately calls a maid and orders her to go to Ekian's room and bring whatever she finds behind the brick. Judith remembers the letter is just normal and warm, and notices the Duchess's hands are already shaking before even seeing it. She reflects on how the Duchess, known for being strict and cold, shows this weakness when it comes to her child. A maid enters to tell the Duchess what she found. The maid presents the letter found inside the brick. The Duchess is overwhelmed with emotion as she looks at the letter. She immediately recognizes her son Ekian's handwriting. The Duchess, now fully convinced, asks how she knew all this, and asks again if she really knows where her son is. She admits her desperation and willingness to do anything, even mobilizing all her family's power, to see her son again. Judith wonders why he left home despite having a family that loves him this much. The Duchess urges her to say whatever her request is. Judith repeats that she didn't come for info, but with a proposal. She reveals she knows about their plan to delay the death declaration and tells the Duchess her proposal is about that. She asks for a 2-day window to let the Duchess investigate her before she reveals the full proposal. The Duchess agrees to meet her in 2 days. She leaves the palace feeling relieved because she reviewed the novel's content carefully despite the heavy pressure. She wonders about her strangely strong memory, which makes her recall tiny details as if someone stuffed them in her head. On her way, she hears passers-by talking about the alley that almost blew up from bombs. She realizes the guildmaster handled it successfully and the disaster was avoided, though she's unsure of the story's future now. The guild master suddenly meets her, calling her Lady Aelan and asking where she's been all morning. He notices she looks totally exhausted, like she hasn't seen sunlight. She playfully tells him she was at the Mios family mansion. He curiously asks why she was visiting the mansion. She decides to tell him in advance that she's marrying into that family because she feels he'll find out anyway. She slyly asks if this is good info, and adds she won't charge him for it. He stays silent in shock. He asks, shocked, to confirm what he heard, and she confirms the news with a bright smile. He tries to understand, ruling out marriage to the younger son or the Duke himself for legal and social reasons. She explains she's marrying the young Duke himself. His confusion grows, asking if she means the missing Ekian Mias, and she confirms it. He shouts in frustration, wondering how she can marry someone who's missing. He reminds her she came to him looking for info on him, so she just tells him to wait and see. She winks confidently, asserting her info has never been wrong so far. The guildmaster thinks to himself that Judith Aylin was always a weird woman who appeared with accurate info while keeping her sources secret. He sees she's become even weirder after becoming an adult. Her claim of loving Ekian, whom she never met, was ridiculous. But her talk of marrying him now is beyond absurd. She's talking about marrying a man who's about to be declared dead. He sarcastically wonders how she'll marry without a husband. He concludes she must have special circumstances, but he trusts she's not the type to scam people. The guildmaster thinks that even if she were a scammer, the Duke's family isn't naive enough to be easily fooled. He figures this makes her story even less believable and stands puzzled by her plan to marry the young Duke. He sighs deeply, admitting he's totally clueless about what's going on in her head. He wonders to himself, revealing his true identity as Ekian Mias, exactly how she plans to marry him. He thinks back to the past and how everyone in the duchy saw him as the rightful heir, even though his brother Carl was more deserving. So he decided to leave the palace before becoming an adult, realizing his disappearance was the only way to change that decision. He barely managed to erase every trace of his identity as Ekian Mias and lived a quiet life as the head of the Grey Information Guild. He wonders why she's showing up now, after nearly 5 years, with a marriage proposal that's just as weird. He finds her claim of having feelings for him totally illogical, since he rarely participated in high society and only with the top nobility. He assures himself it's impossible he ever met her, since she belongs to a barony drowning in debt. He blames himself for being so confused that he forgot his main job, rewarding her for saving the alley by paying off her debts. He decides not to go back to her immediately, assuming she's currently busy with her many teaching jobs. He thinks about her incredibly packed daily schedule, which makes her one of the busiest people in the entire capital. He admires her resilience, noting that despite her chaotic life, she never complained and her eyes always sparkled. He mentions how she's always serious and positive, pulling off tough tasks casually every time. He's convinced she's not the type to resort to fraud and decides to call her in to finish his business and listen to her plan properly. He also decides to hear out that ridiculous marriage plan of hers. Meanwhile, Judith finds herself on the street, having left way too early for her first lesson. The Maya's family butler surprises her with a greeting. He tells her he's coming from the Duke's mansion on the Duchess's orders to escort her and treat her as a guest of honor. She asks for a moment to send messages to cancel her scheduled lessons, but he tells her there's no need. The butler explains the duchy already handled her schedule, so she agrees to go with him right away. He leads her through a narrow alley, explaining the carriage couldn't get in. Judith is impressed by the speed and efficiency of the Mias family, who finished investigating her and cleared her schedule in one day. She finds it hard to believe a family this powerful couldn't find their missing son for years. She thinks their natural blonde hair and exceptional looks would make it hard for any of them to hide. She speculates he might be dead already, or maybe he ran away to hide a terminal illness so his family wouldn't grieve. She concludes this last explanation is the only one that justifies leaving behind all that wealth, honor, and a loving family. The butler leads her inside the mansion, and she thanks him. Judith feels the moment she's been waiting for has finally arrived. The Duchess tells her she couldn't wait until tomorrow and sent her men to get her, and that she finished investigating her background. The Duchess asks if she's bothered by the investigation, but Judith denies it, admitting she was the one who came yesterday without an appointment. The Duchess admits one day of waiting felt unbearably long and painful. The Duchess declares she's not a patient woman and asks to get straight to the point and hear her proposal. Judith starts explaining, mentioning that it'll soon be 5 years since the young Duke vanished, the legal date to file a death declaration. She concludes the Duchess wants to delay this declaration by any means, so the Duchess asks if she can help. Judith reveals she's not the one suggesting a new way, but she knows the solution the Duchess already thought of, announcing a woman carrying the young Duke's child. She explains that claiming there's a real family bloodline in an unborn child's womb will give a reason to delay the death declaration, because a dead man can't father kids. The Duchess confirms she's right, explaining her husband, the head of the family, is the only one who can determine true Mia's blood, and no one would dare question his call. Judith realizes this is just a temporary trick that will only last a few months. The Duchess admits she hopes this message reaches her son, so he knows his place is still reserved in the Mias family. Judith bluntly cuts off her hopes, asserting the young Duke won't return, regardless of the methods they use. Then she makes her offer. If they intend to go ahead with this plan, she wants to be the contract daughter-in-law. The Duchess looks completely shocked by this offer. Judith explains her proposal is to play the role of carrying the young Duke's child, then announce a miscarriage after a few months. The Duchess rejects the offer, saying she can't ask her for something like that. The Duchess explains this arrangement would leave a stain on her reputation and record, as everyone would believe the pregnancy and miscarriage were real. Judith reminds her the investigation definitely revealed the massive debts her father left that she can't pay off. She asserts she has no one to protect her, and no way to settle her debts, so her dignity and honor as a noble are luxuries she doesn't have. She tells the Duchess her fears are meaningless to her. Surviving is more important than chasing illusions. The Duchess marvels at her resilience and steadiness despite everything she's been through. In her office, the Duchess listens to the butler's report, which confirms there are no gaps in Judith's movements over the past few years. The butler adds the only unusual thing is her visiting an information guild, where she seems to sell unimportant gossip she picks up from teaching sessions. The Duchess wonders if she got her info about Ekian from that guild, meaning a low-level info broker knew about the hidden letter. She finds this totally illogical, especially since Judith somehow knew about her plan to delay the death declaration, which is too specific to be just a guess. The Duchess gets more puzzled about the real source of Judith's info. The Duchess asks Judith directly how she knows all these things. Judith replies that since she was little, things she sees in her dreams often happen in reality, and she dreamed about the young Duke and the Duchess. The Duchess presses her, believing she must know where Ekian is, but Judith denies knowing anything beyond what she already told her. The Duchess reluctantly accepts this ridiculous explanation, saying she has no choice but to believe her. However, the Duchess criticizes Judith for her lack of negotiation skills. She tells her if she really wanted this deal to work, she should never have said Ekian wouldn't return. She suggests it would have been better to lie and claim he'd return, or just avoid the topic altogether. The Duchess wonders why she's being so brutally honest when she's in desperate need of this deal. The Duchess explains that in her experience, when someone reveals a weakness before a deal, there's always a calculated reason behind it. The Duchess asks Judith directly for her calculated reason. Judith replies that she gave up her dignity as a noble, but she didn't give up her humanity. She confirms that, as the investigation showed, she desperately needs the money, but she refuses to get money by deceiving a family and giving them false hope. She repeats that this plan will tarnish the duchy's honor, won't bring the young Duke back, and will cost them unnecessary money. She concludes by saying if the Duchess still wants to move forward, she asks to be accepted as the contract daughter-in-law, promising to play her part perfectly. The Duchess decides to herself that since she was going to move forward with the plan anyway, it might not be bad to trust this girl with the role. The Duchess agrees to the deal and suggests preparing the marriage registration immediately due to time constraints. She tells her the Duke will return tomorrow to discuss the matter one last time before submitting it. The Duchess sets a condition that this is just a business transaction, and Judith has no right to interfere in the family's internal affairs. She adds another condition. She must divorce Ekian if he returns, because she wants him to marry someone who truly loves him. Judith smiles and confirms she knows her place well and will leave quietly when the time comes. The Duchess offers to cover Judith's debts as a down payment and pay the same amount again when the contract ends successfully. Judith is stunned by the generous offer that doubles the value of her debts. The Duchess justifies her generosity by saying she at least has enough conscience since she's hindering a young woman's future marriage. Judith loses her cool for a moment. Sure, this isn't a dream. While the Duchess smiles seeing her finally act her age, Judith suddenly bows emotionally, thanking the Duchess deeply and calling her a benefactor, promising to do her absolute best. She asserts her thanks come from the bottom of her heart. The Duchess pretends to be indifferent, saying this amount is nothing for her. Family, and she didn't give it because she likes her. Judith goes to the moneylenders to settle her debts, and one of them tells her with a congrats that all her debts are paid off. The moneylender jokes they might see her again if she needs to borrow, so she screams in his face that she'll never borrow again. The moneylender expresses surprise that a gambling addict like her dad had such a responsible daughter and offers to invest in any business she might start. He comments that despite her resentment toward her parents, she's like them in some ways. Judith agrees, saying she also made a gamble, but with her life. She takes a deep breath after leaving, declaring she's finally free. Judith feels relieved and free after being liberated from the debts she thought would tie her down forever. She credits her quick freedom to the Duchess, who helped her despite acting indifferent. She sees this reward as way bigger than the task required of her and decides to put in more effort and think of anything she can do for the Duke's family. She decides the first thing she must do is handle that matter, realizing she lacks the necessary info and has to visit the Information Guild. She remembers the guildmaster asked her to come today and thinks the timing is perfect to ask for help. The guildmaster asks why she went to the Duke's mansion at dawn and stayed until now, so she tells him she was preparing for her marriage registration. She shocks him with the news, explaining she wanted to tell him personally before rumors spread about her marriage and pregnancy with the young duke's child. The guildmaster seems in a state of total shock and confusion, unable to process what he heard. Judith finds his reaction weird, thinking the news is shocking but not that much, especially since she gave him hints before. She takes advantage of his confusion and teases him, wondering if he has a crush on her. She keeps poking at him, accusing him of hiding his feelings and using his position to watch her, which he strongly denies. She asks why he's so surprised then, and he replies anyone would be shocked by her marrying Ekian Mius, so she agrees. He points out the pregnancy claim is a ridiculous lie, so she challenges him, asking how he could know that unless he's the young duke himself. He gets flustered and justifies knowing because she only became an adult a week ago, so how could she be pregnant? She simply agrees. She thanks him for his sharp observation, asserting she lived a straight life unlike some reckless young people. He asks if she's finally admitting it's all a lie, so she asks him to keep it a secret. He expresses relief that she wasn't fooled by an imposter, and she mocks the idea of anyone daring to impersonate the young duke. She asks why. He requested the meeting, and he tells her it's to thank her, expressing his deep gratitude for saving his life and everyone in the alley. She thanks him in turn for trusting her and taking responsibility for the investigation and the annoying aftermath. He insists on paying back the price of his life, so she thinks about taking advantage of the chance and asking for info instead of money. He announces he'll pay off all her debts as a reward. He tells her not to feel embarrassed. The amount isn't enough compared to the value of his life. She tells him she already paid off her debts. She explains she paid them with the money she got from the duke's family. The guildmaster connects the dots, realizing the money was in exchange for her faking the pregnancy with Ekian's child to delay the death declaration. He thinks this lie won't last long, and once it's exposed, Judith will face a tough fate. She reassures him. She thought of everything before making her decision, but admits she might have hesitated if she knew how rich he was. She asks him to keep it a secret. He agrees and tells her he's ready to fulfill any other request. She immediately jumps on the chance and asks for a favor. She asks him for info on the Mios family home. He claims he doesn't know much and his guild doesn't have informants planted there. He jokingly suggests she investigate herself since she's going to be the young duke's wife, but she rejects the idea, fearing she'll raise suspicions. He offers to pay the contract breach penalty from his own pocket, but she refuses, saying they won't allow it after knowing their secret plans. He asks if there's another reason she's entering the mansion besides money. She answers in a serious tone that there's something she can't ignore. She reveals her concern that the second young duke will be in danger if things stay the way they are. She explains her main goal in becoming the fake daughter-in-law is to protect Carl, the villainous second son in the novel. She remembers Carl went through a chaotic time after Ekian vanished and his parents died, which allowed someone to exploit and abuse him. She reveals the person responsible for the abuse is Sarah, the maid who played the role of the fake daughter-in-law in the original novel. She concludes Sarah must be abusing Carl already, exploiting his lack of maturity and the Duke and Duchess's ignorance. She realizes her position is tough. She's a suspicious outsider while Sarah is an old maid, and any move she makes will reach Sarah's ears. She tells the guildmaster she tried to track Sarah's moves but failed, and asks him to tell her everything he knows. He offers to help immediately, asserting this isn't info for sale but personal help. She reminds him he claimed he didn't know anything, so he suddenly backtracks and asserts he knows the mansion well. She's surprised by his confession, so he repeats he knows Mia's mansion very well. She pretends to be shocked and starts crying, accusing him of lying to her despite her trust. He tries to justify himself, saying sensitive matters can't always be revealed, so she reminds him she told him her secret. He apologizes, explaining he can't reveal everything even to his clients. She fires back that this includes even the client who saved his life, and reminds him of his lie about having no informants. He assures her that wasn't a lie. He really doesn't have informants there. He admits he rarely loses his cool, but her presence makes him feel like a different person. She demands he stop dodging and provide some useful info. He gives in and tells her he knows a secret passage. He reveals he previously got the secret route, maps for the Duke's mansion, and asks if that would help. She asks excitedly if the passage leads to young Lord Carl's room. He says it leads to most places. She realizes this is more useful than she expected, as she'll be able to find evidence against Sarah more easily. She asks for a map and how long it'll take to copy, but he refuses to give her the map. He justifies the refusal, saying the passages are way too complex and she might get lost or caught. He offers to help her and go with her personally. She asks about the plan, so he suggests starting with surveillance. He tells her they have to go now, so she wonders why the rush. He reminds her she said the child is in danger, so she agrees it's urgent. He decides not to waste any more time and they head out. She's surprised by his haste and wonders if he likes kids more than she thought. She finds herself inside a dilapidated shack. containing a secret passage entrance, and expresses her surprise. She asks how he got info like this. He says he just got it somehow. She smiles, saying asking an info guildmaster about his sources is weird. He asks her to keep this a secret from the Duke and Duchess. She expresses concern about the weak security since outsiders can easily come and go. He assures her he's the only one who knows about this passage, so she assumes someone told him. He tells her they're dead, which shocks her. He tells her the real passage starts here. She realizes now why he said a map wouldn't be useful. The passage looks dark and super complex. He asks her to hold his hand tight so she doesn't get lost. She agrees, feeling shy, and promises to be careful. He asks her as they walk if she's sure about her decision that will affect her future marriage. He explains it'll be hard for her to marry a good noble again. She replies she's not sure. Maybe because she never learned about noble honor. She remembers how her dad and mom neglected her upbringing. She mentions they hired a tutor for her, but their marriage was a failure. She recalls how her dad rarely came home and how her mom was closer to a servant than to him, and eventually ran off with him. She thinks it would have been better if her mom married that servant from the start, since she looked happy with him. She concludes she doesn't mind marrying a commoner as long as he's responsible and loyal. He's surprised by her accepting the idea of marrying a commoner. She asserts that's way better than marrying a noble like her dad, and sometimes wishes she wasn't his daughter to avoid inheriting his debts. She suddenly adds another condition for a future husband. She playfully announces he has to be handsome, so he comments on her sticking to her principles. They finally reach their destination, and he whispers that this is young Lord Carl's room closet. He notes how cramped the place is because of the clothes. He points her to a gap in the door she can look through. Judith realizes the situation is intimate, and she can see clearly through the gap. She wonders to herself why the guildmaster has such an athletic and well-built body. She recalls how she dedicated all her time and passion to paying off her debts, from giving private lessons to making repayment plans. She admits she never noticed him as a man before. He hid most of his physical features skillfully, and even his voice was changed by a magic tool. She adds to that she was just a little girl when they first met. She never imagined her heart would race just from their bodies touching. She keeps wondering why his body is so solid, admitting she didn't expect him to be this big. She wonders if she's imagining hearing his breath through the mask. He whispers, asking if she can see well. She flusteredly says yes and suggests he go rest because nothing has happened yet. She asks him to go back and rest and leave her to watch alone, noting they don't need to watch together. He claims he's fine and wants to watch the young lord, but she realizes he wants to leave because he's uncomfortable, so he admits it. He tells her he's just as uncomfortable as she is, so she finds it weird since she's way smaller than him. She claims she has enough space, so he asks her to stop fidgeting because he's uncomfortable too. She realizes she's practically in his arms and any extra movement will make things more awkward. She nervously asks him to move away a bit. He reminds her he told her before she wasn't the right person to work with him. He admits he loses his cool and feels like he's becoming childish when he's with her, so she asks if he realized that. He hints that she also acts childish, so she replies she's still fresh to being an adult. She suggests they focus on their original mission of watching Lord Carl, and he agrees. She takes a look through the gap and admires how cute Carl is. She finds it hard to believe this cute kid will grow up to be obsessed with the heroine and torment her. The maid Sarah enters the room, so Judith knows she'll finally witness her true nature. Judith describes her as the culprit who turned Carl into a villain, Sarah Orton. She recalls how Sarah was smart and beautiful since she was young and saw herself as different from other maids. She believed her place was beside Ekian and watched him for a long time. Even though Ekian gave her gifts sometimes, she knew it wasn't out of romantic interest, so she didn't cross her boundaries. She knew by instinct she'd be kicked out if she tried to get closer. After Carl was born, Ekian cared for his little brother a lot. Seeing that, Sarah also started taking care of Carl with great attention. Sarah thought if Carl got attached to her, she'd become closer to Ekian. Carl, described as a genius, followed Sarah well because she could answer his tough questions unlike other maids, increasing the time they spent together. But the problem started after Ekian vanished. Sarah thought she'd become his wife over time. Everything collapsed for her when Ekian disappeared. Sarah was left with nothing but her friendship with Carl, which she only built to become a duchess. Her anger turned toward the Mias family, and she decided to destroy them completely using the bond she built with Carl. She decided to destroy them in a very cruel way. The master reassures Judith that the maid looks kind, noting her good reputation, and closeness to the Mias brothers. Judith realizes the guildmaster knows nothing about Sarah's true nature. She confirms he knows nothing at all, so he looks at her in surprise. Sarah appears and starts manipulating Carl psychologically, warning him his mom will be upset if she knows he's reading peacefully. She hints people might think he's happy his brother vanished so he could become the heir. Carl screams, denying it and confirming his wish for his brother's return. Sarah pretends to believe him, but plants doubt in his mind about what his mother might think. She continues her manipulation, suggesting Ikian might never return if he thinks Carl is fine without him. Carl screams again, explaining he reads books because his brother asked him to and promised to praise him when he returns. She coldly tells him that was an old story and the situation is different now. She suggests he use a different way to bring his brother back and starts asking about his weight and eating habits. Carl justifies that he eats because his mom gets sad if he leaves food. Sarah tells him Ekian will be disappointed if he sees him growing healthy without him. Carl worries about upsetting his mom, so Sarah asks him to come to the back garden after his meal. She promises she'll help him vomit his food so he becomes thin, and the news reaches his brother that he's waiting for him to return. Carl is delighted, happy with Sarah's smartness and her ability to solve his problems without upsetting his mom. Carl fully trusts Sarah, believing she's the only one who tells him such things. Judith feels disgusted and angry at Sarah's cruelty and thinks she at least got some info. The guildmaster tells her he can't watch this anymore. He asks if she can go back alone, announcing he needs to do something about that woman immediately. She tries to calm him down, asserting they can't change anything if they get caught and that Carl is on the maid's side. He insists he'll handle it somehow, so she tells him that's why she's here. Sarah suddenly hears a sound and asks Carl if he let someone in. Sarah heads toward the closet to check the source of the sound. Sarah opens the closet and checks it but finds nothing. Carl asks her what's wrong. She answers it's nothing. She decides to inform the head maid, believing there must be a gap somewhere. The guildmaster breathes a sigh of relief, realizing they weren't caught, fortunately. He suggests staying like this for another moment just in case. Judith feels relieved they survived thanks to him, but feels shy about their extreme closeness. The guildmaster apologizes for his outburst, admitting he never imagined a maid like Sarah could be this cruel. Judith concludes she must have been acting so brilliantly all along that no one noticed. He asks about her next plan, believing she stopped him because she has a backup plan and didn't come all this way to leave Carl alone. She comments that he's talking a lot for the first time and concludes he must really love kids. He asks her to stop laughing. He tells her breath tickles his neck whenever she laughs, so she gets annoyed by his comment and asserts she brushes her teeth well. He seriously tells her he's sure of one thing: she's not pregnant, and she knows nothing about men. She asks him in shock how he knew. He ignores her question and asks for her next step. She tells him she achieved her goal for today because they aren't the ones who will save Carl. He asks who will save him then, so she replies she's not sure, but something is said. She explains with a smile that when a child is in danger, his parents should save him. The next morning, a letter arrives from the Duchess of Mius. The Duchess invites her for tea and lunch with her and the Duke, who'll arrive in the afternoon, to introduce her to Carl. Judith asks the servant to wait a bit so she can write her reply. The guildmaster surprises her by asking if it's a lunch invitation, so she wonders how he knew. He tells her it was easy to guess since the Duke is returning today. He asks if she's leaving. She tells him she'll write the reply first. He suggests she go now since lunchtime is close, so she playfully asks if he's so free he's spending the morning in her room. He tells her he's busy but was curious about her plan, so she tells him to sit while she handles it. He reveals to her he also has a little brother around Carl's age, and maybe that's why he feels this isn't someone else's problem. She's surprised he has a brother, so he asks why she reacted that way. She justifies her surprise by saying she thought he was a man with no heart, friends, or family, so he asks her to just insult him instead. She suddenly asks him if there's a secret passage in the back garden too. The guildmaster tells her there are no secret passages outside, but they can sneak around the area if they're stealthy enough. He thinks back to last night, trying to figure out a way to infiltrate the place and take out that maid. He decides to go solo because it'd be too risky for both of them to try and sneak inside together. The guildmaster asks her not to judge him too harshly for what he's about to say. He explains that if they don't stop the maid, the young master might die, and her evil deeds make her a criminal who deserves the death penalty. Judith snaps and slams the table, arguing against his disregard for human life and insisting that killing isn't the solution. Judith points out that Carl needs to realize Sarah's lies for himself, wondering what would happen if she died before he understood the truth. The guildmaster realizes she's right. If the maid dies now, Carl will remember her as a good person for the rest of his life. Judith adds that a person's words carry way more weight in people's minds after they pass away. He admits she's right, and apologizes for showing such a pathetic side of himself because he got too emotional. She gives him a kind smile and reassures him that the situation definitely called for some real anger. He remembers how close they got in the secret passage and how that made him see her human side, connecting with her deeply after years of distance. She asks if he's okay, and he decides to follow her plan and instructions no matter what she intends to do. He warns Judith that she needs to understand the true meaning behind his upcoming words and actions. He admits he usually doesn't trust anyone and works alone, but this time he'll watch her move and put his trust in her. She teases him, asking what he would have done if he didn't agree. Would he have stormed the place to stop her by force? He tells her with total seriousness that he trusts her completely, both logically and emotionally. With a smile, she reminds him they've been working together for 3 years, yet he's only choosing to say he trusts her now. She promises not to let him down and assures him everything will be wrapped up successfully by that afternoon. The scene shifts to the afternoon, where Judith arrives at the garden and apologizes to the Duchess for being late due to a prior lunch appointment. The Duchess secretly hopes Judith didn't turn down the lunch invite just to avoid her. The Duchess thinks about how thin Judith is and how much she wants to feed her. Well, to make up for her past suffering. The Duchess realizes her fondness for Judith grows every time she sees her, considering her smart and worthy of being her son's wife. The Duchess believes Judith could masterfully run the family affairs with a bit of guidance, but knows that's only possible if Equian returns. Carl notices his mom daydreaming and asks if something's wrong, which she immediately denies. The Duchess claims she was just worried about him not eating well and encourages him to keep eating. Carl enthusiastically assures her he's eating great today and takes a huge bite to put her mind at ease. Carl mentions hearing about the teachers being fired and the night training stopping, justifying it by saying he just needs a break. The Duchess feels sad that Carl is so affected by his brother's absence, but she's somewhat relieved that Sarah is there to fill that emotional void. The Duchess asks Carl to finish his dessert quickly while she gets ready to welcome their expected guest. She tells him she'll introduce him to this important guest later, and Carl obediently agrees. The Duchess gets ready for the tea party in the rose garden, enjoying the fragrant flowers and the peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, Judith bursts into the scene, running in a total state of panic and terror. Judith screams a warning to the Duchess that Carl is in immediate danger and urges her to come quickly to save him. Flashback to Carl waiting alone in the garden before the maid, Sarah, approaches him. Sarah asks Carl about his meal and apologizes for not staying until the end to avoid being around his mother. Carl tells her his mother was busy preparing to receive an important guest coming later that afternoon. Sarah thinks wickedly that since everyone is busy in the garden, she doesn't need to be extra cautious with her plan. Carl assures Sarah he followed her instructions and got rid of the teachers and training sessions, claiming he desperately needed rest. Sarah praises him, tricking him into thinking that enduring the heir's harsh training is reckless and unnecessary right now. Sarah feels a rush of ego and vanity for successfully getting the genius child to obey her every command to the letter. Sarah secretly wishes Equian were there so her perfect plan to control the family would be complete. Sarah insanely believes she's the only woman who truly deserves to be Equian's wife. She blames Equian for leaving her, believing she's a precious, shining star who shouldn't spend her life as just a maid. Sarah directs her spite and hatred toward the family, specifically Carl, blaming them for all her failures. Sarah gives Carl a magic potion, telling him it'll help him vomit and get rid of the food he was forced to eat. She lies, saying she struggled to get this potion from the city last night, and innocent Carl thanks her for her efforts. She keeps manipulating his mind, convincing him that staying sick and weak will force his missing brother to return. She tricks him into thinking that Equian's intense worry over his illness is the only thing strong enough to bring him back. She warns him that if he succeeds as the heir and grows up healthy, Equian will feel at ease and decide never to return. Carl decides to drink the potion, fully convinced that staying weak and sickly is the only way to see his beloved brother again. Sarah encourages him with a wicked smile, telling him he's the only one who can bring back the happy days they had with Equian. The guildmaster watches the scene angrily from the bushes, wishing Judith would hurry up before it's too late. He grips a tree branch tightly, telling himself he's only holding back from killing this toxic woman because he trusts Judith's plan. Sarah pressures Carl to drink the potion fast, promising to bring more after every meal he eats. She convinces him this sneaky method will bring Equian back without having to worry his parents or tell them anything. The Duchess suddenly intervenes, slapping the bottle out of Carl's hand as she screams a flat-out refusal. The bottle shatters, spilling everywhere, and Sarah is struck with shock and terror at the sight of the Duchess. The Duchess grabs Sarah by her clothes with violent rage, ordering her to shut her lying mouth. The Duchess harshly scolds the ungrateful maid, disgusted by her bold audacity to harm and manipulate her young son. The Duchess screams for the head maid to drag Sarah out immediately and call the knights to throw her into a dark cell. Sarah resists fiercely, screaming arrogantly for no one to dare touch her, thinking she's superior to the other servants. One of the maids, calmly and creepily, agrees they aren't the same, calling her an evil woman who used her beauty and cunning to torture an innocent child. Sarah begs Carl for help, but the maid reminds her that her annoying screaming will only make the knights treat her harsher. Judith watches the scene with total relief that Sarah is dealt with, getting ready for the next and most important step of her plan. Carl cries and tries to defend Sarah, thinking she was acting in his best interest. The Duchess is horrified by how brainwashed her genius son is. The Duchess realizes Sarah is the reason for Carl's decline, and the boy admits she convinced him this suffering was the only way to bring his brother back. The Duchess asks him with heartbreak if he really thinks his loving brother would be happy to see him in such a miserable, sickly state. Carl feels a sense of dread, realizing he's never seen his mother this angry or emotional before. Carl breaks down in bitter tears, wondering why they don't understand his simple wish for his brother's return, and if what he did was truly wrong. Judith wisely steps in to stop the Duchess from scolding Carl, gently placing her hand between them and asking to leave it at that. Judith stands as a shield between them and places the real blame on Sarah, reminding the Duchess that Carl is still just a child who's easy to manipulate. The Duchess objects, pointing out that Carl isn't a normal kid but a genius with the intellect of an adult and a photographic memory since infancy. The Duchess fumes with regret over her brilliant son being so easily fooled by Sarah's ridiculous and destructive lies. Judith smiles and reminds the Duchess that sharp intellect can never replace life experience, as he is still a little boy. She explains that his ability to read difficult books and solve complex problems doesn't mean he has real-world wisdom. She firmly emphasizes the fact that Carl, despite his genius, is just an innocent 8-year-old child who needs protection. She explains that the role of adults is to guide children and teach them right from wrong, then officially introduces herself to Carl as a baroness. Carl introduces himself politely despite his tears, and Judith is struck by his kindness and innocence, which contrasts with his future as a villain. Judith corrects Carl's warped views, firmly telling him that everything Sarah said was a flat-out lie. She explains that someone who truly loves you never wants to see you in pain, and Equian's heart would break to see him torturing himself. The Duchess listens in moved silence as Judith adds that Equian left his parents in Carl's care to protect them. Judith gently reproaches him for behavior that caused his parents so much grief and despair. A sobbing Carl tries to justify himself through thick tears. He gets defensive, questioning how much she really knows about his brother's feelings to talk with such confidence. He justifies his blind trust in Sarah by saying she was very close to them and knew everything about his brother since they were kids. The Duchess screams at Carl to stop mentioning Sarah's name, wondering if Equian would have really left without a word if he actually cared for her. Carl angrily asks how Baroness Ailan is any different and why he should trust her. The Duchess explains to Carl that he should trust Judith because she is carrying his brother's child. Both Carl and the Guildmaster are stunned by the Duchess's sudden and blunt announcement. The Duchess confirms to Carl that the Baroness was his brother's lover, and she is now carrying his nephew or niece. Carl asks Judith to stand up because he read in a book that bowing is bad for pregnant women. Carl asks Judith if she knows where his brother is now, since they were lovers. Judith hesitatingly replies that Equian has left once again. Judith notices Carl looks heartbroken, thinking he finally found a way to reach his brother. Carl's expression suddenly shifts to a determined look, making Judith wonder if he's lost his mind. Carl angrily declares he can't support a brother who abandoned his lover and child, calling him absolute trash. The Guildmaster watches from afar while Carl feels deeply sorry and apologizes on behalf of his irresponsible brother. Carl later concludes that Baroness Ailan is a good person while she reads to him in his room. Carl thinks about how comfortable he feels with Judith, unlike Sarah, even though they just met. Carl asks when the Baroness will move in with them, and she explains it'll be after the marriage procedures are done. Carl realizes the reason she was late was because of what Sarah did, which Judith confirms. Carl asks for permission to call her sister-in-law, and Judith happily agrees. Carl tells her to feel comfortable with him too since they're family now, and she promises to try. Carl vows to scold his brother when he returns and apologizes for his behavior, making Judith laugh. Carl deduces that his brother's departure means he was entrusted with taking care of their parents, and now his wife and son too. Carl assures Judith he will protect her and the baby until the end, even if his brother never comes back. Judith looks at the sleeping Carl, finding him incredibly sweet and looking just like a little kid. Judith is startled to find the Guildmaster in her room near the closet, wondering why he's still there. She sarcastically asks if he's so free that he spent his whole day following her around. The Guildmaster justifies his presence by saying he was worried about her and asks her to step into the closet with him. He curiously asks how her plan succeeded, and she realizes that's why he was waiting. She explains that she sent a letter to invite the Duchess for tea in the garden, knowing Sarah would meet Carl there. She explains she timed everything perfectly, and that the Duchess followed her immediately upon hearing her son was in danger. She admits she was surprised by the Duchess's sharp temper, but found it logical and refreshing since it was about her child. She adds that the Duke and Duchess will decide Sarah's punishment, hoping Carl isn't too hurt by it all. She notices him staring at her face, and he suddenly thanks her. He explains he heard every word she said to Carl to calm him down and teach him. He thinks her words were very warm, especially when she said children have the right to grow step by step. He describes her as a good person, which piques her interest. She playfully asks if he's fallen for her, making him blush and get flustered. She keeps teasing him, saying she's smart and kind-hearted, while he gets more flustered by her being so close. She reminds him the timing is terrible because she's about to get married and doesn't want a relationship right now, but she adds that she's not rejecting him entirely, which surprises him. She suggests he show his face later if he's serious, and then she'll think about marriage again. He's stunned that she's already thinking about a second marriage before her first one is even official. She justifies it by saying she'll be debt-free soon and has the right to think about her future after everything she's suffered. He reminds her she liked Equian, but she replies there's no point holding on to someone who might be dead. She says even if he's alive, he might have turned ugly from all the suffering. He gets annoyed by her coldness, so she sarcastically asks if he was dumped because of his looks, then apologizes. He advises her not to rush into marriage again now that she has money and time. She agrees, explaining she might think differently if she actually had a family now. She remembers that her own family was a failure, which wasn't her choice. She admits she felt jealous of Carl because his parents actually worry about him, unlike hers. She expresses her desire to build a family with someone of her own choosing, confident she'll succeed. She tells him she'll give him a chance, as she doesn't mind marrying a commoner as long as he's rich and responsible, and she adds that she doesn't even know if she'll like his face. Meanwhile, Carl is having a nightmare in his room. Judith decides to leave and tells the guildmaster to get going too. The guildmaster is left alone, confused by the casual way she said all those things. The next day, another invitation arrives, but this time it's from Duke Mayos personally. The guildmaster, who's been hanging out in her room since morning, says goodbye. He justified being there by saying that as the Information Guild leader, he needs to know anything happening secretly in the palace. She thinks he seems sensible enough to respect the boundaries she set, but she also thinks she might seriously consider his offer if his face is decent. She decides to postpone thinking about it for a few months. Baroness Judith Aylin arrives at the Mayos Palace as the candidate for the contract daughter-in-law. She's greeted by both the Duchess and the young Lord Carl. The Duchess claims she only came to express her gratitude for what happened yesterday. Carl grabs her out of habit, saying he came because he was happy to see his sister-in-law. The Duchess comments on the beauty of the roses, which confuses Judith. The Duchess clarifies she was just talking to herself. Judith realizes they were affected by her mention of the roses yesterday because they aren't good at expressing their feelings. The Duke notes that this is the first time the Duchess and Carl have agreed on liking the same person. Judith meets the Duke for the first time and introduces herself officially. The man introduces himself as Pen Mayos, head of the Mayos family. Judith recognizes him as the Iron Duke, Pen Mayos. She finds that his appearance matches his title. He looks harsh and cold. Carl leaves after greeting his sister-in-law. Carl wishes her good luck before leaving, and Judith thanks him. The Duke begins the formal procedures and introduces the doctors present. She's shocked when the doctor introduces himself as Bart Kalin, the family doctor for 10 years. She immediately remembers he was one of the Emperor's men in the novel. The Mayos family was a constant threat to the Emperor because of their power and wealth. The current Emperor was extremely wary of the duchy. Bart Kalin was the Emperor's right-hand man, dedicating his life to carrying out his wishes. She realizes she forgot that this man is the reason the Duke and Duchess die in a year. The Duke explains that Bart is responsible for his health and the family's nutrition. Another young doctor named Hude Lamas is introduced. He joined the palace 2 years ago. The Duchess explains he's a talent she discovered herself, and he specifically takes care of her and Carl. Judith feels somewhat relieved because he has no connection to Bart, but she stays on guard. The Duke asks if she knows why the doctors were called, and she says yes. It's revealed that the Mayos bloodline has a unique aura that only the head of the family can recognize, even in the womb. Therefore, a pregnancy certificate from the doctors and the Duke's signature will prove the child's lineage. This way, they can claim Equian is alive for at least a few more months. She deduces that Bart won't contact the Emperor immediately because he plans to kill the couple in a year. The doctors present the forged documents, and the Duke apologizes to them, asking them to understand a father's feelings. The Duke lets the other 2 doctors leave. The Duke tells her she'll be staying at the palace from now on after the marriage registration is complete. She agrees and asks him to call her by her first name. The Duke coldly says they'll be a temporary family, and the Duchess comments on his attitude. The Duchess notices Judith's clothes are old-fashioned. She insists she must look the part of a Mayos daughter-in-law, even if the role is temporary. Judith vows to do her best, and the Duchess tells her she'll get her new clothes immediately. The Duchess orders Judith to stand up right away, confusing her. The Duchess enthusiastically announces they're going shopping first. The Duchess admires a white dress and orders it added to the list. Moving on to the next. Then she orders an elegant black dress added as well. She doesn't hesitate to add a trendy red dress to the pile. The Duchess expresses how much every dress suits Judith and decides to see the final one. The Duchess asks her to try one last dress, kindly asking if she's tired. Judith insists she's not tired but hesitates to say something. She expresses concern that maybe they've picked out too many dresses. The Duchess pretends she's only doing this for her own personal pleasure, not because she thinks Judith is special. She urges her to hurry up and try the last one. She agrees with the designer that all the dresses look amazing on her and feels proud. The designer curiously asks the Duchess about her relationship with the young lady. The Duchess proudly announces she's going to be her daughter-in-law. The Duchess asks to see the final dress immediately, declaring there are plenty of accessories and shoes to buy too. The Duchess looks stunned when she sees Judith in the final dress. Judith notices the Duchess's expression doesn't look great and asks if the dress doesn't suit her. The Duchess insists it suits her better than any other dress and orders her to wear it right now. Judith concludes that despite her words, the Duchess really likes her. Judith wonders, surrounded by all the shopping bags, if she'll even be able to wear all these clothes. The shopping continues until sunset when they return to the palace. The Duchess leads Judith to the room she'll be staying in from now on. The Duchess tells her she'll stay in Equian's bedroom because it's only natural for a couple to share a room. Carl suddenly knocks and enters with the young doctor, Hyud. Carl innocently wonders if his brother really likes beautiful women, and Judith thanks him shyly. Hyud assures Carl that his sister-in-law is truly beautiful and stunning. Judith notices that Hyud isn't just good at studying, but has great social skills too. Carl asks her to rest before coming down for dinner, and she agrees. Judith breathes a sigh of relief after they leave, realizing she didn't think through the whole staying in the young Duke's room thing. She notices that the room, though empty for a long time, is still in great condition. She concludes this means the Duke and Duchess are still waiting for his return. A bookshelf suddenly moves, scaring her and making her wonder who's coming. A familiar voice from behind the shelf reassures her, telling her it's just him and she can relax. Judith finds that the guildmaster is the most dangerous-looking person at this moment. Flashback to an old memory where the Duke takes his son Equian to a secret place. The Duke reveals the existence of a secret passage in the palace to his son. He explains that this passage connects the entire palace and can lead anywhere outside. Young Equian expresses his surprise as he never knew this place existed. His father tells him the tunnels are vast and complex and he must follow closely. The Duke suddenly decides not to tell Carl about this passage, which confuses Equian. The Duke explains that this passage is a secret known only to the family head and his heir, and it carries a huge responsibility. He tells him that if the family faces a crisis, the head must stay alive at all costs to preserve the Mayos legacy. Equian finds it hard to accept the idea of the family head running away and abandoning everyone. The Duke leaves the choice to Equian to decide what he'll do, as that is the burden of the family head. Equian decides he doesn't want to survive alone, and he doesn't want to lose his family. The Duke is happy to hear his son shares the same feelings. Equian vows that day to become a family head like his father and protect the Mayos family no matter what, but he later realized he wasn't destined to be the heir. The guildmaster thinks about how he never intended to return, but he kept coming back because Carl was in danger. He decides this will be his last time in this place. He's surprised to find Judith in the room and reassures her she can relax. He asks Judith for help getting out of the secret passage because he can't leave on his own. He guides her on how to open the passage by pulling certain books in order. Judith is amazed by how far these secret passages stretch. She sarcastically wonders if he thinks it's normal for a stranger to wander through these passages. She alerts the guildmaster from his daydream and asks what's wrong. He claims he was just surprised. She playfully asks if he fell in love with her again after seeing her all dressed up. She reminds him he'll have to wait until her divorce since she's Equian Meos' wife now. Equian wonders to himself what would happen if he returned to the palace. He knows his parents and Carl would be overjoyed at his return, but he fears Judith will try to leave as soon as his identity is revealed, as per her contract. He hopes she'll stay with him as his wife, relying on her old feelings and her wish for a family. He dreams of them becoming a real couple if that happens. He snaps out of his dreams, realizing he's losing his mind. He decides he must stop coming here because it's getting dangerous. Judith asks if he's okay, and he assures her everything is fine. Judith decides to ask him if he knows Bart Kellen. He confirms he knows the duchy's doctor. He tells her he's an exceptional doctor who spent years serving the family and his loyalty is unmatched. Judith finds it weird that he has no assistant, even though he was an assistant before. She reminds him of the debt he owes her and asks if the offer is still on the table. He agrees immediately, but hesitates when he hears it involves the duchy. She assures him it's serious and more than one person is in danger. She tells him 3 people in this palace might be poisoned and she needs his help. The Duchess praises Judith to her husband, describing her as a wonderful girl despite her irresponsible parents. The Duke feels sorry that they hindered the marriage prospects of a nice girl like her. The Duchess suggests they arrange a good marriage for her later. The Duke reminds her the contract is official and the gifts they gave her are enough. The Duchess reminds him she saved Carl's life, and a few trinkets can't repay a debt like that. The Duke reluctantly agrees, but insists that arranging a marriage is a whole different story. He wonders if she's planning to be her surrogate mother and warns that she might exploit the family name. The Duke finally gives in, saying he might not trust her, but he trusts his wife. The Duchess predicts that once he gets used to her, he'll shower her with even more gifts than she did. The Duchess challenges her husband to see how long he'll last before he grows fond of Judith. Judith knocks on the Duke's office door, announcing herself. The Duke allows her in, on the condition that it's official business. He tells the maid she can leave because he hasn't finished his drink yet. Judith asks if this is the tea Dr. Bart prescribed, and he confirms he drinks it every day. The Duke explains Bart visited this morning and prescribed the tea, assuring Judith she'll be treated as family. The Duke asks the purpose of her visit, and she tells him she has a concern regarding the marriage registration. The Duke encourages her to speak, expecting she might have changed her mind due to the weight of the situation. Judith reveals her birthday was recently, which surprises the Duke. She explains she's worried that announcing the pregnancy now would mean she got pregnant while a minor, which would hurt the young Duke's reputation. She adds that this would also affect the honor of the entire duchy. The Duke admires her deep thinking, as she cares for the family's honor instead of just taking the money. The Duke decides to artificially set the pregnancy date, but Judith suddenly stops him. Judith apologizes, claiming she smells something weird, and asks to check his teacup. Judith remembers the question that popped into her head after meeting the Duke and Duchess. The novel said the couple would die in a year, but they didn't look sick at all. She knew Bart had already started setting the stage for the poisoning, which raised a new question for her. She wonders how Carl survived the poisoning plot, if they failed to kill him, and why. She remembers the Duchess mentioned Hugh prepares medicine for Carl's severe stomach pains. After forming her hypothesis, she asked the guildmaster to tell her when the Duke drinks his tea. Despite the guildmaster's skepticism of Bart's loyalty, she insisted on her request. She desperately hoped her theory was right, realizing how dangerous it would be if she was wrong. The Duke asks if she wants to check the tea, and she says yes. He agrees to her request, and she approaches him, thanking him. Judith assures the Duke that the strange smell is definitely coming from the teacup. She asks him not to drink it and to call Dr. Hugh immediately. The Duke angrily asks why she's specifically asking for Hyud. She claims she learned about herbs through her friendship with a herbalist while working as a teacher. She admits the story is made up, but she can identify herbs by their scent. She tells him the tea smells like a poisonous herb whose name she can't remember. She explains this poison doesn't show symptoms at first, but leads to death, which shocks the Duke. She suggests Hyud check it to be sure, as caution is a must when it comes to health. The Duke realizes from her serious look that she's not saying this lightly. The Duke calls the butler immediately. He orders him to bring Hyud and the tea his wife and son drink, keeping the matter secret. Hyud arrives in a hurry, expressing relief that the Duke is safe. The Duke asks about testing the tea, and Hyud confirms there's a way. Hyud points out that bringing poisonous herbs into the palace is almost impossible. Judith suggests the idea of herbs interacting to become poisonous, which Hyud agrees with. Hyud hesitates to check Bart's prescriptions out of respect for him as a senior doctor. The Duke finds it hard to believe, especially since he and his wife felt the benefits of the tea. He explains his wife's health improved after the tea, as did his own energy. Judith asks about young Lord Carl's condition. She points out the contradiction. The tea makes Carl sick despite its supposed benefits for others. Judith realizes she doesn't have enough evidence to convince him and feels she can't just leave it at that. Hyud suddenly stops her, asking her to wait a moment. He tells them he thinks he overlooked something and needs a moment to think. Hyud performs a test on the tea, leading to a chemical reaction. Judith confirms her theory about why the couple felt healthy and why Carl survived. Bart's original goal was to kill all 3 slowly so the cause wouldn't be discovered. Unlike his parents, Carl suffered stomach pains, which led Hyud to find an effective treatment. Prescribing this medicine every time was what kept Carl alive. Hyud confirms to the shocked Duke that the tea indeed contains poison. He explains that the mix of herbs in the 3 cups is what created the poison. He calls this poison the patient killer. as it gives a sense of health before leading to death. This was also the cause of Carl's stomach pains because children's bodies are more sensitive. The Duke panics, wondering if Carl is in danger now. Hugh reassures him that the medicine he prescribed contains a rare antidote. He explains he used this antidote constantly because it was the only effective treatment, without knowing the real reason. If it weren't for Carl's symptoms and Hyud's medicine, the palace would have been empty in a year. The Duke asks if he and his wife have been poisoned, and Hyud tells him it's not too late. The Duke asks about the possibility of it being just a mistake. Hyud explains that using the same ingredients for everyone and not changing them for Carl is suspicious given Bart's experience. Hyud concludes the chance of error is almost zero, and that it's over 99% intentional. The Duke orders everyone to be silent and leave for a moment. The Duke addresses Baroness Ilan, admitting she saved his family. He expresses his deepest gratitude to her. Later, the Duchess asks if Bart confessed, and the Duke tells her he didn't deny the charges. The Duke considers his silence a confession, and the Duchess wonders about the motive. The Duke decides to investigate Bart's background, suspecting another party is behind him. The Duchess realizes things would have been catastrophic if not for Judith's intervention. The Duke agrees, noting she risked herself even though the contract is temporary. The Duchess describes her as a good girl, and they both admit they owe her once again. The Duke decides to take responsibility for her and arrange a proper marriage for her with a count's family. The Duchess smiles, realizing her husband has already grown fond of Judith. The Guildmaster asks Judith how she managed to know all that. She makes up a story about seeing Bart near the guild and overhearing a conversation about him being a poison killer. The Guildmaster expresses his shock as Bart's loyalty to the duchy seemed so strong. Judith doubts this loyalty story. She thinks it's more likely Bart was never loyal and was acting for a specific goal. She concludes his goal was a perfect assassination, which is why he chose a slow-acting poison. She suggests the Guildmaster leave because he must be tired, but he denies it. She teases him that it's inappropriate for them to be together so late and that he's trying to get close to her. He gets flustered, wondering if a man and woman meeting at night necessarily means other intentions. She mocks his innocence and wonders about his ability to perform his daily job. Their conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door, and she wonders who the visitor is. It turns out to be Hyud, who wants to talk to her. The Guildmaster asks anxiously if she's going to let him in. He warns her she'll be alone with another man, but she doesn't see a problem with it. He insists he came to get close to her, but she scoffs at the idea. She pushes him to leave, accusing him of being the one who can't act normally. He asks about her clothes, and she tells him the Duchess got rid of her old ones. He feels annoyed when he hears Hyud call her Baroness, realizing he's using her official title. Judith tells him to stop clinging and get out, which shocks him. She kicks him out forcefully, comparing him to a jealous husband suspecting his wife of cheating. The Guildmaster gets kicked out in total shock, unable to believe he was just compared to a jealous husband. Judith invites Hyud to come into the room. She asks him to call her by her first name until the marriage is officially registered, and he agrees. They both refuse to drink the tea, which cracks them both up. She asks why he's visiting and if Bart has confessed to everything yet. He tells her that Bart hasn't admitted to a single thing so far. He explains that he's actually there for a personal reason. He thanks her deeply, admitting he's in her debt as the duchy's doctor. She goes easy on him, explaining that the deep trust everyone had in Bart was what kept any junior doctor from suspecting him. Hyud admits his work was restricted because of Bart, who kept him away from any prescription duties. She offers him some comfort, and he points out that with his skills, he could have gone anywhere else. He justifies staying by saying that signing the fake pregnancy certificate went against his conscience as a doctor, but he did it for the money. He reveals he has 7 siblings, which leaves Judith totally puzzled. He explains that his parents sold their farm just to put him through school, and his second brother was the one supporting the whole family. She asks about his parents, and he tells her they passed away a long time ago. Judith realizes his story is a perfect match for the missing brother of the main lead in the novel. She figures there's no way 2 stories could be this identical, and his age fits the timeline perfectly too. She's shocked to realize this guy is actually a Marquise's son, and that she might be able to help him find his real parents. She worries about what would happen to his siblings if he went back to his biological family. She asks him if he finds it hard to carry all that responsibility on his shoulders. She reminds him that he could have walked away from them at any time. She adds that he could have traveled or gotten married just to cut those ties. He admits he never really thought about it before, but now sees those as possible options. But he brushes the idea off, admitting he doesn't think he could actually do it. He says seeing Carl reminds him of his own siblings and that he'll be heading back to them right away. He views himself as just a doctor chasing money under the excuse of his family. She reassures him that what he's doing comes from a place of love for his siblings, not something to be pitied. She tells him she wishes she had an older brother like him, and that she's actually jealous of his siblings. He admits he never expected to find such comfort in a fancy palace like this. She suggests they support each other since they're in similar spots, and he agrees. Judith decides she's definitely going to help this kind and hardworking young man. She vows that she'll find his biological parents no matter what. Meanwhile, the guildmaster is thinking that Hude coming over in the middle of the night was a reckless and suspicious move. He wonders why Judith let him in so easily, especially since she made him wait for 3 years. He remembers her words about giving him a chance if he's rich and loyal. He gets annoyed at the thought that she's handing out chances to everyone. He decides to push those thoughts aside and focus on the mission. He realizes he desperately needs to meet Bart right now. He flashes back to a fateful night when he was 17, the night everything he believed in started to crumble. Bart knocks on the young duke's door, asking to speak with him. Bart enters, and Equian thanks him for coming. Bart explains he knows why he was summoned, claiming it's out of loyalty to the Mios family. He tells him he's forced to tell the truth out of respect for him. Bart drops the bombshell. He's not the biological son of the Duke and Duchess. Equian refuses to believe such a sudden claim and calls it an insult. Bart tells him the tea he drinks every morning contains a substance that changes his hair color. Equian stops drinking the tea for a while, hoping Bart's words were just nonsense. But he's horrified when he sees black strands of hair growing in his golden hair. He had no choice but to accept Bart's words. He asks Bart about his real parents, but Bart refuses to answer. Now, Equian meets Bart in his cell, and Bart looks surprised to see him looking like this. Bart recognizes him immediately, despite his new appearance. Bart tells him it's more appropriate to call him by the title Prince. He tells him he'll answer his questions since he's dying soon, so he'd better hurry. Equian asks why he told him to leave the family if his loyalty was a lie. Bart mocks him, confirming he's not the Duke's real son. He tells him his appearance now looks exactly like the Emperor did in his youth. He insists that what he told him 5 years ago wasn't a lie, so Equian asks why. He kicked him out then. Bart coldly replies that staying would have hurt him even more. He calls him the cursed prince. Hyud tells Judith that people assume medical academy students are all rich. He explains that he's currently paying his siblings' tuition from his high salary. He points out that they also get free food and drinks. He expresses his deep admiration for the Mayos Palace. He notes that a lot of the criticism against the family actually comes from the imperial family. Judith agrees. Everyone knows the Emperor sees the duchy as a thorn in his side. He reveals to her that the Emperor was the one mocking the Duke and Duchess when they couldn't have children. The Emperor snuck into the Academy records and leaked the Duchess's medical details to high society. Judith finds this behavior disgusting, especially since someone's desperation shouldn't be mocked. She decides she has to find Hude's biological parents as soon as possible. She wishes she could meet the guildmaster to ask about it, but she can't just go visit him. She decides to ask Hude for help since they've become friends. She asks Hude to do her a favor, and he agrees instantly. She asks him to deliver some letters to a trusted servant because she doesn't know the staff well. He offers to deliver the letters himself since he's heading out tomorrow anyway. She asks if it'll be a bother, but he assures her it's no trouble at all. Judith thanks him warmly for his kindness. Suddenly, Hude gets the hiccups from pure shyness and embarrassment. She asks if he's drunk, and he claims the alcohol is starting to hit him. He tells her he'll be back tomorrow after delivering the letters. She feels dizzy all of a sudden after he leaves. She throws herself onto the bed, enjoying the comfort. The guildmaster is surprised to see her lying on the bed like that after drinking with another man. He sarcastically adds that she's doing this in her husband's room. Judith wakes up feeling something strange and different than usual. She notices the guildmaster looks different and wonders if something happened. She decides to get up and ask him about it. She tries to stand but feels dizzy and loses her balance again. She tells the guildmaster to stop as he tries to catch her from falling. He tells her the blanket is about to swallow her whole. Judith apologizes to the guildmaster for her state, explaining she loses all her strength when she overdrinks. The guildmaster scolds her for not knowing her limits and drinking with a guy she just met. Judith justifies it by saying she and Hude are colleagues since they work for the same people, and she asks him for help getting up. He points out that their relationship was just a business transaction, not a partnership. The guildmaster sarcastically asks if entering the Duke's palace together counts as a working relationship too. She angrily demands he take the damn blanket off her before she suffocates and throws up. He warns her not to puke on someone else's bed, and they bicker before he finally agrees to free her. He comments on how weird the situation is while saving her from the blanket, telling her to stay still. She notices his touch is careful and totally free of any bad intentions. Even so, she feels strange at the slightest touch of his fingertips. She thinks about how bizarre the scene is, lying on a strange bed while he unwraps her. She blames herself for talking too much. Thinking she should have just stayed quiet, he advises her not to trust men so easily, especially those who've been drinking. He warns her that men with bad intentions are great at steering conversations to make a woman feel comfortable. She gets annoyed by his constant lecturing and tells him she's a grown woman. He sighs, pointing out she's barely an adult, and she admits this might be only the second time she's ever drank. He keeps scolding her for being careless, so she stops him because her head is killing her. The guildmaster sighs in defeat. Now that she's free, she asks him if he wants to lie down next to her. He gets flustered and jokingly asks if she's the one with inappropriate intentions toward him. She firmly denies it, and the guildmaster wonders why she'd even ask him to lie down. She asks him if he's not feeling well. She notices his mood has been off for a while and suggests talking about light stuff, but she doesn't have the energy to sit up. She suggests they talk for a bit before he leaves without him having to explain what's bothering him. He lies down beside her on the bed and calls her name. He warns her never to drink again, especially with Dr. Hude. He explains that her behavior could be misunderstood by men, who'll think she's going to ask them to lie down too. She replies with a smile that there's trust between them built over time. She claims her offer was just out of kindness because he looked sad, and he wonders if that even counts as kindness. She suddenly remembers the bed isn't hers and feels bad for the young duke. She says she'll apologize to the young duke if he ever comes to complain. He suddenly laughs and she comments on how beautiful his smile is. She notes that their talk, even if it's meaningless, makes him feel better. He agrees, admitting he thought he'd never smile again, but found himself doing it with her. He tells her that maybe that's why he came to her, without even thinking. He calls her wise for knowing that being with her would make him smile. She thinks to herself that her ability to comfort him wasn't because of wisdom, but because she'd been through the same thing. She remembers how, as a kid, she wished someone was by her side when she was sick or sad. She recalls her longing for someone to share her struggles with, even if it made life more complicated. She remembers feeling lonely when Hugh talked about his siblings, realizing she has no one to be responsible for. She concludes she was just emotional that night and didn't want to send him away after he finally smiled. She remembers they talked for a long time until she drifted off, and when she woke up, he was gone, leaving her tucked in warmly. She wakes up the next day and realizes she forgot to ask about the Sudan Marquis family. She reassures herself that Hugh will deliver her letter today. Hugh is shown doing his errands, carrying Judith's latest letter for delivery. He remembers how everyone was sad about Judith resigning, praising her kindness and hard work. He smiles, admitting to himself that she really is a good person. He looks for the address on the last letter he needs to deliver. He's surprised to find the address belongs to the Grey Information Guild. He realizes he could also buy information about something he's curious about. He thinks about asking how to win the heart of someone he's crushed on. Back in the past, Bart tells the cursed prince that he must be curious about his real mother. He reveals that he's the child born from the Emperor's assault on the last priestess. In the present, Equian feels a sense of disappointment in his existence again, as if he's back in that moment. He believes that if he hadn't gone to Judith yesterday, he wouldn't be sitting like this now. He thinks he owes her his life twice over. He finds himself thinking about Judith yet again. Hugh's voice interrupts him, announcing he has something to deliver to the master. The guildmaster recognizes Hugh's voice immediately. Hugh expresses his relief at being allowed to see the master in person. The guildmaster explains he's receiving the letter personally because it's from a special and close client, Judith. Hugh comments that other parents said the same thing, proving Judith was great at her job. The guildmaster notices Hugh's elegant appearance and green eyes. He sees a straight posture and an aura of nobility that surpasses most young nobles. He finds the fact that Hugh is cheerful incredibly annoying. He worries that Judith's type might be someone like Hyud, rather than a mysterious guy like himself. Hyud notices his strange mood, but the master tells him to stay. He tells him he'll read the letter and reply right away, asking him to wait. He reads the letter and realizes she wants info on the location of Marquise and Marchioness Sudan. He wonders why she's suddenly looking for them, even though the info isn't hard to get. Hyud confirms this place is indeed a den for selling information. He asks if he can get some information too. He shyly explains he's interested in a beautiful and kind woman he met recently. He admits his ignorance in matters of love and asks for advice on how to get closer to her. After the master stays silent, Hyud asks worriedly if the guild doesn't handle requests like this. He thinks about the guild's strange and imposing atmosphere. He thinks about the master's terrifying aura despite his good manners. He reflects on the master's mysterious identity, hidden by his mask and distinct voice. He concludes the place is for top-secret info and feels embarrassed about his request. He tries to withdraw his request, but the master agrees to answer him. He tells him he can determine if he even has a chance with her or not. The guildmaster correctly guesses their first meeting was at Duke Meos's palace. He reveals he knows Hugh is the Duke's attending physician. He rattles off his full name, qualifications, and career history. Hugh is blown away by the guild's ability to gather info. The guildmaster advises Hugh to give up on the girl he loves. He tells him she only sees him as a close colleague and flat out rejects the idea of him trying to get closer. Hugh asks about her type, wondering if a handsome and hardworking guy isn't enough. The master claims he doesn't know all that, but insists there's one thing for sure that Hugh knows himself. He points out that Hugh isn't in a position to pursue a relationship with her, which Hugh admits. The guildmaster tells Hugh that taking it slow won't work because he's simply not her type. Hugh expresses surprise, insisting he's objectively not bad-looking. Hugh mentions he has a face any woman would like, a fact the guildmaster finds even more annoying. The guildmaster points out that nobles generally prefer other nobles. He explains that the girl he's interested in is a noble, and she won't see him as a man unless he holds at least a count title. Hugh denies it, but the guildmaster insists there isn't a single noblewoman who doesn't think that way. Hugh admits he's right. The guildmaster ends the consultation, declaring he's busy handling Judith's request. He tells him there's no need to pay any fees for the information. He explains he owes at least this much to Judith's colleague, hinting at his special relationship with her. At the palace, Hugh explains to the Duke that the herbal tea will help detoxify his body. The Duke expresses his gratitude to Hugh for being Carl's doctor. Hugh gives the credit to Judith, or the young Duchess. The Duchess agrees they'd be in huge trouble without Judith, praising her bravery. Hugh asks to leave, feeling proud that they're praising Judith. The Duchess thinks to herself that she can't marry her off to just anyone, even if it's a second marriage. She decides she must look for a proper family from the count class for her. Hugh wonders to himself if he was being too greedy. He realizes Judith deserves a high-class life and that marrying a commoner like him would be a burden because of his siblings. He concludes he was wrong to think there was a special bond, and that she was just being considerate because he's a commoner. He admits everything the guildmaster said was right in the end. He wonders what if he were a noble himself. He decides to live his life to the fullest within his current circumstances. He resolves to be a good friend to Judith and be a source of strength for her. Hugh enters Carl's room to give him medicine, and Judith is surprised by his arrival. He explains the medicine he brought is for the young Duchess. Carl is shocked and asks worriedly if his sister-in-law is sick. Judith reassures him she's enjoying his reading and the medicine isn't because she feels ill. Hugh reveals the medicine is to help with morning sickness. Hugh praises Carl's vast knowledge, and Carl confirms he's read about pregnancy and childbirth. Carl asks worriedly how bad her nausea is, and she reassures him it's not that bad. Hugh tells her the medicine will make her feel better and that it's also used for mild nausea or hangovers. Judith thanks him, feeling relieved. He gives her the reply to the letter she asked him to deliver. Hugh decides to focus on what he can do now. He tells himself he is Judith's good friend. The letter tells her that Marquise and Marchioness Sudan have arrived in the capital for a banquet at the Imperial Palace. Judith wonders about the sudden tone in the letter. She sees the Marquise and Marchioness being in the capital as good news, but thinks about how to tell them about Hugh. She realizes a direct approach won't work and will just look suspicious. She remembers she convinced the Duchess by claiming a prophetic dream, but that won't work with the Marquis and Marchioness. She searches her memory for something from the novel she can use. She suddenly remembers something important. She recalls that in the novel, the Marquis and Marchioness would visit the shrine of Chaska, the last shaman, whenever they came to the capital. They visited the shrine to pray for the safe return of their missing eldest son. Chaska was the last heir of the Uele tribe, known for their ability to see the future. Chaska came to the empire alone and offered to naturalize in exchange for land to build a small shrine, but she never left the shrine and never revealed her power, eventually disappearing without a trace. Nasty rumors spread about her, claiming she was a witch who might be carrying a demon's child. Mysterious things started happening at the shrine. The incense never went out and the flowers never withered. When the people who tried to destroy the shrine went insane, it became a place where people came to offer prayers. Judith realizes the Marquis and Marchioness are among those people. She decides she has to exploit this fact. She comes up with a plan and gives it a funny name: the spirit-possessed young Duchess. Her plan involves getting to the shrine before them and pretending to receive a revelation from Chaska. She'll claim she heard Chaska's voice telling her their son is working as a doctor at the Meos Palace. She sees it as a perfect plan that also explains her prophetic dreams to the Duchess. She decides she must first get permission to visit the shrine. She plans to tell the Duchess she dreamed of going to the shrine to pray for the baby's health. There's a knock at the bookshelf. She's surprised it's the guildmaster and lets him in. She wonders why he came in person instead of sending a letter and finds his behavior inappropriate. She asks if he received the letter she sent and why he's here. He sarcastically asks if they should only meet when there's business to discuss. She answers with a flat yes. He wonders in confusion if he did something wrong. She clarifies she's not angry, but she feels bad toward the Duke. She explains that having a stranger wander through the house without the owner's knowledge is creepy, even if his intentions are good. She asks him to communicate through official channels from now on. He asks mockingly if Hugh is now closer to her than he is, and she says that's not what she means. She tells him she has to leave now to get permission from her mother to go out, which shocks him. He asks if that's weird, and she explains the Duchess was the one who asked her to call her that. After a silence, he says he understands. She tells him the Duchess seems even kinder than her real mother, despite the weird comparison. She wonders if her talk is strange, and he tells her he's wondering too. He reveals to her that he only recently discovered the identity of his real mother, and that the person who raised him and the one who gave birth to him are two different people. She deduces he's talking about the day he looked so broken. She thinks she doesn't know the right words to comfort him, especially since he never talks about himself. The guildmaster changes the subject and asks where she's going. He's shocked when she tells him she's going to the shrine of the last priestess. He asks worriedly why she's going there. She jokingly tells him she's going to pray for the baby's safety. She adds she wants to ask something personal, though she heard no one ever gets answers there. He asks if going there is part of her duties as the young Duchess. She tells him he doesn't have the right to interrogate her. He apologizes, admitting his curiosity crossed the line, but points out she seems very involved in the Duke family's affairs. He adds she's so involved it's hard to tell if she's a real daughter-in-law or a fake one. She agrees and tells him she's just an employee. She announces she's leaving now, reminding him she needs her employer's permission to go out. After she leaves, she wonders if she was being too emotional. She blames his weird behavior for making the whole conversation feel unnatural. She remembers what the guildmaster said about her not being a real daughter-in-law and gets annoyed by him pointing out the truth. Judith admits to herself he's right and that she'll leave one day, realizing her anger comes from her wish to stay longer. She figures the guildmaster must have been shocked too and decides she should clear things up next time they meet. The guildmaster remembers how he crushed Hugh's feelings when he asked for advice about someone he likes by criticizing his social status. He recalls his temporary relief at seeing Hugh give up, but anxiety soon took over. He thinks that Hugh, unlike him, can stand by her side openly. He compares Hugh, a good and honest man, to himself, a mysterious and suspicious guy, and feels like he's acting like an idiot husband meddling where he doesn't belong. He reminds himself that without the identity of Equian Mayos, he can't even stand before her. He regrets the way he spoke to her, admitting he lost control of his emotions when she mentioned going to Chaska's shrine. He decides he must meet her again to settle things. Realizing she must have been confused too, he decides to go to the shrine himself, intending to apologize to her first when he sees her. He admits that thanks to Judith, he'll finally go to that place he was hesitant to visit even after hearing Bart's story. He arrives at the shrine and finds it as strange as the rumors say. The candles don't go out even in the rain. He notices the long line of people, realizing how desperate they are despite the fact that no one has ever received an answer from the shrine before. He sees the Marquis and his wife praying for the return of their son who's been missing for over a decade. He deduces Judith is here for the Marquis and Marchioness and wonders why she's approaching them. He notices her simple clothes, expecting the Duchess advised her to move quietly until the pregnancy is announced. He speculates the pregnancy will likely be announced at the upcoming imperial banquet. He suddenly realizes he looks like a creepy stalker, watching her and making assumptions on his own. He convinces himself he's not bothering her, just waiting silently. He plans to look for a chance to talk to her when she comes out of the shrine. A powerful lightning bolt suddenly hits the shrine, spreading terror through the area. The people outside panic while the Marquis decides to visit the shrine himself after clearing up a misunderstanding. The guildmaster is shocked that the shrine's candles went out for the first time, wondering if it's a curse from the last priestess. A passerby screams that it's a curse. While the master wonders to himself if he's the reason for what's happening, he tells her in his heart to stop this nonsense, believing she shouldn't do this no matter how much she hates him, and he calls out to Judith anxiously. The scene flashes back to the past, where Equian Mayos was a happy boy and the heir to a wealthy and powerful family. His life was perfect with respectable parents and a kind younger brother. Despite the bad relationship with the imperial family, he trusted the crown prince would fix things. As time passed and Equian secured his spot as heir, his life turned upside down. Dr. Bart came to him with an unbelievable story. He wasn't the Duke's biological son. As proof, Bart told him that stopping the tea would reveal black hair. It didn't take long before Equian discovered every word was the truth. Bart handed 2 medical records to the desperate Equian. One record was for the Duchess and contained a 10-month time gap. Bart explained the Duke and Duchess were on a trip to Bart Island the year he was born. There, they found an abandoned infant and didn't return to the capital for 2 years. Bart revealed the child they adopted was him, which explained the gap in the Duchess's records. Bart mockingly pointed out that a child barely a year old had grown quickly to look like a 2-year-old. Equian angrily cut him off, declaring he'd ask his parents himself. Bart told him he's no ordinary child, but carries imperial blood. Equian was stunned by this new revelation. Bart explained the royal line shares one single trait blessed by the moon. He shows him the power of instant healing under the moonlight after cutting his own arm. This power is a privilege granted by the moon to the imperial line. Bart claimed he was the only one who knew his true identity and told him out of loyalty. He urged him not to stain the Mayos house with imperial blood. For that reason, Equian left the house feeling pain but no grudge, believing he'd bring shame to the family. But 5 years later, he discovered Bart's betrayal and demanded to know the real reason he was kicked out. In prison, Bart asks Equian if he's curious about his biological mother. He reveals he's the child born when the Emperor assaulted the last priestess. His mother gave birth to him and cast a curse that the Emperor would die at the hands of this child. The Emperor tried to kill him but backed off for fear of the priestess's curse. Instead of killing him, the servant threw him into the sea, where the Duke and Duchess found him on Bart Island. The Emperor and the Duke knew this much, but the Duke family hid the truth out of love for him, while the Emperor waited for their fall. Equian wonders why he was kicked out 5 years ago, if that was the plan. Bart explains the plan changed when he realized things weren't going as expected. He admits he originally came to poison the Mayos family on the Emperor's orders. But as soon as Equian appeared, his plan started to fall apart. The Emperor ordered him to stop the poisoning, wanting to see the family destroyed by the son they raised. At first, Bart assumed the couple wouldn't fully accept Equian, and his role would end as soon as Carl was born. But they never gave up on him, and he grew into a young man. Bart warned the Emperor repeatedly that Equian wouldn't kill the Duke, and that they should resume the poisoning plan. Bart realized he'd become a forgotten pawn when the Emperor stopped listening to him. Equian finally understands this is why Bart kicked him out of the palace. Bart confirms he did it so Equian would leave faster, assuming he'd gained the Emperor's favor. Bart mocks the story, pointing out that the tool meant to destroy the Mayos family had disappeared in its place. Back at the shrine, Judith feels things are going smoothly as she managed to stand directly before the Marquise. She's confident people will believe her when she claims she received a revelation after leaving. She wonders anxiously if it's okay to use the priestess's name so easily, and fears being cursed. She reassures herself her intentions are good, and that the priestess will understand. She reminds herself she's survived scarier things, like a mountain of debt. Upon entering, she finds the shrine perfectly clean despite there being no one to look after it. She's impressed by the candles that never go out inside the shrine. She wonders if there really is a mysterious power in this place. She's surprised and shocked when one of the candles that's supposed to never go out suddenly dies. She immediately bows and prays, asking for forgiveness from the priestess. She apologizes for using her name, insisting her intentions are good and asking for help just this once. She hears a strong wind and fears being trapped inside. A mysterious figure appears and tells her they're finally meeting, calling her by her full name. She's struck with amazement and wonders if this figure knows her identity.